It's all about being a little bit vulnerable because that is how we grow. That is how we grow in anything, right? If we want to be something that we currently are not today, we have to be willing to do things that we didn't do or want to do today.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it.
As we talk today, what I want to talk about as we kind of move through Maxwell's 21 irrefutable laws is the third law, which is the law of process. And I think this is a perfect time of year to talk about this concept, mainly because I would assume that a lot of you are getting ready to, put down your goals for next year and what does 2025 look like and how are we going to accomplish it. So I want to go through kind of this law, the law of process. It's one of my favorite laws because it is the law that we get to control every single day. Leadership develops daily, not in a day, right? You come to one of these, we spend 45 minutes together, and at the end of it, we leave, maybe having taken some notes, maybe having taken a few takeaways, a few action items, but how does that continue on, right? If we just did one of the things we learned today, if we did that tomorrow morning, but then we failed to do it Thursday, Friday, into next week, so on and so forth, then what good did it really do, right? With anything, I think we all can agree, a big goal, a thing that we want to accomplish, most of those are not accomplished in a day, right? It's not a big goal if you say, hey, I'd like to do this by the end of the day, right? And so when we think about the law of process and we think about it as it relates to leadership, we think about it as it relates to really anything that we do in life, how do we embrace this process? I'll tell you a little bit of a story, and I kind of told this the last time so it's been 2 weeks ago. I talked a little bit about my personal kind of leadership story, right? I started in this business, I didn't know anything, and so, it wasn't probably for a couple of years where I realized, hey, people are looking at me to make decisions and so on and so forth. And I don't feel like 100% confident in making the damn thing in the first place, but someone's got to make it and we're going to move forward. And I think that's where I started to really lean into this whole process thing, right? Getting up early, reading something, journaling, doing all of these things that really had no effect during that particular day, right? It was wake up early, read a little bit, write down some things I'm grateful for, journal, do all of those things that I'd been told were good things, right? But at the end of the day, when I showed up to work, what happened? Well, you went to work, right? You did all the things that you need to do on a daily basis that you're tasked with, all the meetings, all the, tasks, all the this, all the that, all of those things begin to take over, right? And so it's very difficult to understand where, reading for a short time about leadership in the morning really pays dividends, right? It's like, well, I read about it, but I still had, an employee issue today. I still had all of these things that may have went right, wrong, or indifferent, or good news, bad news, whatever it may be. All of these things happen. So like, what good did that do me? Well, when we think about the law of the process, it's not going to do you any good that day. Where it does us good is when we repeat that over and over and over and over and over again. The interesting thing about leadership that we have to understand is that it's never over, right? There's never going to be a time when someone, or at least I hope there isn't, when someone shows up and is like, hey, I've been putting in a couple years on this stuff, so I'm pretty much, God's greatest gift to leadership today. It doesn't happen. Because leadership is ongoing. Even when you retire from here, you'll be called on to be a leader. Because leadership, as we've talked before, is all about influence. You guys know this in your daily lives. If you want to get stuff done, there's only so much work you as one human can do. But if you can influence a bunch of others to help you in whatever the endeavor is, big things get done, goals get achieved. And so as we talk about the process, leadership is probably the most frustrating one to follow the process, right? If you want to lose 10 pounds, well, you can follow the process for maybe a month, 2 months, whatever. You hit your goal, you step on the scale, you're like, boom, arrived. I'm 10 pounds down. Leadership isn't like that. I've been doing this for years and I've still got years of stuff to go. Yeah, I've probably gotten better over time, but I'm still not where I want to be. And I know that if I stop the process, well, things start to go in the other direction. I know that because that's what I've done this year, is stop the process. That's why about a month and a half ago, I made a commitment to you guys that we're going to talk about leadership and we're going to get better every single week. Because I forgot that. Because it's easy to forget, right? You get bigger. We try new things. We're growing. We have problems. Oh, we got to hire more people. We got to do all of these things get in the way. And what I know, what I want to lean back into is what I've told you over the last couple of weeks is leadership development. Because it's my belief that if we continue to work this process, and this doesn't mean you need to spend 45 minutes every day or 2 hours every day. Everyone's busy. But could you slide in 20 minutes? Could you do something for 5 minutes that's going to help you along the way? You may not see the result today. You may not see it next month. You may not see it next June. But what I can tell you is if you put in, and I'm using 20 minutes as an example because it's a very easy thing, right? Set your timer for 20 minutes. I'm sure you can find 20 minutes within your day to work on this. And it's not hard work, right? It's like reading 10 pages of a book. But you may spark an idea, or it may help you out in a situation. What I have found is leadership development, because there is no end, oftentimes it's just about putting yourself in the right frame of mind to be successful. And that's the cool part, right? Like if you want to lose 10 pounds, putting yourself in the right frame of mind isn't going to help, right? I'm in the right frame of mind, but I'm sitting in my seat, like we're burning no calories. Whereas leadership development, if you put yourself in that place, all of a sudden you start making different decisions. All of a sudden you start leaning into what you found. All of a sudden you start to see it work. You start to believe in it. And you start to want more and more and more because you see it working. So as we think today about the process, it has kind of almost like a negative connotation, right? It's like process. God, that seems like, like I got to do the same thing every single day. That's what it is. That's what happens. When I was preparing for this, I thought about just an overarching example. I feel like, I've been married for 8 years now. And, think about if you've been in a relationship or even with friends, different stuff like that. Like when you're first in that relationship, it's really easy to go above and beyond, right? Doing different things. Oh, I'm going to surprise him here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. What do they call it? Honeymoon phase where, it's just all great. Everything's awesome. Every day is just, whoa, this is great. Well, then as time goes on, what happens? Much like in business, we get busier, right? You got more meetings. At home, you got kids. You got this. You got that. And I don't know how many times this year I've turned to my wife and said, why are we so busy? Where do all these things come from? Can we just say no to a couple of them and just maybe just sit on the couch and relax? But as time goes on, we forget about the process, right? Any relationship, much like leadership, is a process. You've still got to have those things. You've still got to be able to go above and beyond. It's a lot like if we're running a department and we have a contest one month to get the guys really jacked up. There's nothing wrong with that. But yet, what are those things that we're doing that are part of our process? A contest is simply an event. A really good service meeting is an event. And yes, those will happen, but how do we lean into the process? How do we really lean into making sure that we're lifting people up? that the people on our team are maturing, that we're having great one-on-one conversations, we're helping them achieve goals. Because that won't happen in a day, right? Won't happen in a month. It's a constant working of that. When we think about leadership growth, Maxwell talks about there's a couple of different phases to this whole thing. He says phase one is the I don't know what I don't know, right? Some of you have probably been in that spot. You got promoted to a manager or you're taking on new responsibilities and you're like, what am I supposed to do, right? And we've been guilty of putting people in positions and not helping them know what they need to know. And as long as you don't know what you don't know, it's going to be very difficult to grow, right? And that's a lot of the purpose of these, is to put in front of you the things that you need to know. And then it's your duty to carry those out, to work the process, to continue to get better each and every day. I've talked about this concept before, and a mentor of mine once told me it, and I've kind of lived by that, is acting like the person you want to be today. So like if one of your goals is to be a really great leader or to, hit a goal or whatever it is, like think about what that person does on a daily basis. I'm a huge sports fan, and I think about, since we're in like the NFL season, you think about, the quarterback, most important position out there, right? And some teams have good ones, and some teams have not so good ones, and some teams have terrible ones. But somehow, all of those guys managed to convince a team to pay them an extraordinary amount of money to play that position. So why is it that there are only so many Peyton Mannings, Drew Brees, Tom Brady? Why are there only a handful of those guys, right? They could essentially put a team on their back and win games. They all have access to all of the resources that anyone and everyone would truly need. When we think about talent, there's a reason why none of us in this room are starting at quarterback. All right, we don't have the talent. Well, it's all been assessed by NFL people who get paid a lot of money that all 32 quarterbacks, I take the second string guys too, so 64 quarterbacks in the league, they've all been assessed that they've got the talent to throw the ball where they need to throw it, right? They can all heave it. But there's a lot more to it, right? There's a whole process. We've all seen the documentaries of Peyton Manning and, in the off season going through all of these drills and all of this stuff and all of these guys. What separates them? Well, what separates them is they fell in love with the damn process. I mean, you can look at these guys, like it blows my mind to like watch some of these guys and you just see that the GM fell in love with the arm talent. They fell in love with this like supreme athlete, but I feel like what they forgot was that playing quarterback is a very cerebral game. They've got to know where everybody is on the field all at the same time and be able to do it in real time. That's hard. That takes practice. That takes a lot of reps. That takes just a ton of work. I always laugh at the people who are like, playing football, that'd be the easiest job. Hell, you only work one day a week. I think it would all make us sick to understand how many hours the best of the best put in to be at their very best. And that's true with anything in life, right? We don't know what we don't know until we figure out what it is that we need to know. And then we use the process to get better and better and better and better and better and better each and every day. Phase two, I know that I need to know. So when we think about where each of you are today, I think it's probably a fair assumption that, or at least I hope it is, that you know that you need to know how to become a better leader. You know what you need to know. Well, as I said at the beginning, you're not going to figure that out today. You're not going to be perfect today. And that's okay. In leadership, you'll never be perfect. It's all about just getting a little bit better, just a little bit better each day. Because I think if we've proved anything, it's that you don't necessarily need the skills. You just need the will to be the best leader possible. Because if you've got the will, what I can tell you is there are plenty of resources out there that you can take that will and go use those resources to get better. I said at the beginning, I love this rule because we get to control it. This is probably the story of a lot of your lives. It's the story of all our lives, right? Leaders are not born. They worked at it. Each of you probably worked at your craft to the point where it was like, I'm the best one here. The same thing is true for leadership. You empower others to do the work. You can have all the answers in the world, but if your team doesn't believe in you, doesn't trust you, doesn't want to run through that wall for you, what are your answers worth? Not a whole lot. You may be able to solve that problem in that moment, and that's great. But at the end of the day, your goal is to make sure that they one day can solve that problem. The goal is for them one day not to have to call you. The goal is for them to be as good a technician as you were or are now, have that much knowledge. Now, that's a hell of a lot harder, right? When you have the answer, it is very difficult to want to work with someone so that they then find out the answer because it's slow, right? We work in a fast-paced industry. We need solutions now. We need to run calls now. We need to solve things now. All of those things. But that is what we're called to do. Phase 3 is, I know what I don't know. So some may be sitting there and saying, hey, I'm not great at this. That's the best first step. I'm not great at this. Guess what? No one started as a great leader. Now, you may have had experiences along the way that have, helped you kind of move up that you didn't even really know were happening at the time, right? We've all had those, like, oh, shoot, like I remember learning that there and it really worked with that team. And now I can carry that on here. But understanding what you don't know and then putting together a plan. So I mentioned at the outset, 20 minutes. I was journaling to the kids this morning, and you got to make things very simple. That's why I like writing to them, right? You have a kind of like breakdown. I talked to them all about what we're going to teach today. So they will learn this at some point in their life. But I said, here's the deal. You need to figure out what we just talked about. When you figure out what you need to do, well, if I want to become a better leader, I need to probably look at some books, listen to some podcasts, come to these things, like pretty simple stuff, right? We could probably all make a list of, hey, here's all the things that could be done to improve my leadership. Well, then we've got to be able to put that into our day, right? We've got to be able to do it consistently. And the one thing, and maybe people don't agree with this, but I've found that it works in mine, is to make the commitment that you're going to get a little bit better. Make the commitment small enough that it doesn't really alter the course of your day. So maybe for some of you, it is 10 minutes. You know what? I can do 10 minutes. Do 10 minutes a day. I'm going to get a little calendar. And every day that I do 10 minutes, I'm going to make a big red check mark through or big red X through that day, knowing that I accomplished it. 10 minutes. Make it small. I don't need you guys studying leadership for hours a day, but could you do 10 minutes? 10 minutes a day. What if your morning routine looked like, you know what, I'm going to show up. Hell, you don't even need to show up any earlier. I'm going to show up at the time I show up to the office. I'm going to grab my coffee. And for 10 minutes, I'm going to sit here and get in the right frame of mind because I'm going to read 5 pages of this book. Or I'm going to listen to this podcast while I'm getting the day lined out or whatever it may be. Could you commit to that? My guess is probably yeah. The other thing you want to look for is triggers, right? If I'm trying to eat healthy, the number one trigger for me is don't go out to eat. Eat at home because I can control what I'm going to eat. So Tuesday comes around and it's Taco Tuesday and everybody's pumped up. I know that if I want to eat healthy that week, I can't participate because I can't control myself. If I go out to a restaurant, I'm probably going to get the thing that isn't probably the greatest for me. But that's okay. Everyone has their own things, but figure out what those are. So if your commitment is 10 minutes, one of the things I always ran into, like if I was going to commit to working out every day, I can't do it at the end of the day because I have no idea how the day is going to go. It's probably going to go off the rails somewhere. Something's going to happen, and then I'm not going to be able to keep that commitment. But if I do it in the morning, I know I can kind of control that. So think about those things. Once you know what you don't know, well, then put together the plan of how you're going to get there. We already said leadership never ends. So at the end of the day, whether it's a big commitment or a small commitment, a commitment every day is going to get you better. There's no end goal. So it's not like the more you do today, the faster you get there. It's all about doing something today. Do something today, do something tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. And maybe you just do it during the week. Hey, I'm going to take the weekend off. I'm going to fully unplug, do my thing. Okay, cool. But for 5 days, I'm going to keep my commitment. If you did 10 minutes a day, that's almost an hour a week. And it's probably like 70, 80 hours a year of leadership work that over the course of the year that you'll get done, and you do that by just doing 10 minutes a day. The great thing about leadership development is it starts to compound, right? 10 minutes a day, all of a sudden, in the course of a month and a half, I've read a whole book. Maybe I haven't ever picked up a book in quite some time. Well, you just read a whole book, 10 minutes a day. The last phase is I know and grow, and it starts to show. Start developing your leadership today. At the end of the day, you're starting to develop your leadership today. Is it going to hurt anything? Probably not. All you got to do is find 10 minutes. And here's what I know, because I've tried it both ways. You can accomplish far more focused on building your leadership than you will by not focusing on it, because I've tried it both ways. Too many times when we're not focused on building our leadership skills, what do we focus on? All the things we cannot control. And what good does that do us? Not a whole lot. Trust me, I've tried. I've tried to focus on the things that we can't control and see if I can get something to happen, and it usually doesn't. This is something I know we all can control. What can we do today? Do we understand that leadership is our only way to grow? We can control it, we can create influence, and ultimately, we reach phase 5, which is I simply go because of what I know. Maxwell says in here, when you're in phase 4, you can be pretty effective as a leader, but you have to think about every move you make. However, when you reach phase 5, your ability to lead becomes almost automatic. You develop great instincts, and that's when the payoff is incredible. But the only way you get there is to obey the law of process and pay the price. Andrew, a few weeks ago, encouraged you to have really crappy one-on-ones. Thought that was interesting advice, but I thought it was a great place to start. I'm sure there's a piece of you that would really like to believe his theory on what a one-on-one can truly do to impact performance. I'm sure you're all wondering, when he said that, all right, this guy, what is this? But I've already heard early stories of some really profound things coming out of these. And we just got started. And we started with crappy ones too. But what is that to work on it? Hey, I got 2 this morning. I'm going to do my first one. I'm going to get better at the second one. And what if those became really easy? What if those became automatic? And you just knew, sitting down with each person, how I'm going to get the best out of them today. How I'm going to help support them in hitting their goals. Well, it takes work, right? No one showed up one day and was like, yeah, I'm great at these conversations. They're not easy. They're harder, right? You're trying to ask the right questions. You're trying to get someone to buy into achieving their dreams. You're trying to let them know how excited you are about what it is that they're doing and all of these things, right? But it's all in the process. It's all about being a little bit vulnerable, because that is how we grow. That is how we grow in anything, right? If we want to be something that we currently are not today, we have to be willing to do things that we didn't do or want to do today, right? We all know that to be true. I'm not going to get a different result by doing the same damn thing over and over and over and over and over again. It's going to be about doing something a little bit different. It's going to be kind of putting myself out there, being a little bit uncomfortable. Are you willing to buy into this idea of the process? Are you willing to buy into this idea of, I don't know what reading or listening to something for 10 minutes every day is going to do for me, but I'm going to trust in it and I'm going to do it. I'm telling you, if you trust me and you do this, your results will start taking care of themselves. Your team will see it. Your team will respond to it. It is the only thing I've found. I get asked all the time, how'd you guys do what you did? Found really great people. We leaned into becoming better leaders, and the results kind of took care of themselves. Yeah, sure, we've added people. We've gotten smarter. We do things differently. That's not to take away from any of that. But the foundation of who we are, what we're about, the culture that we've built here, it all rests on this concept, is that we're willing to put in the work. I'm not asking you to work harder. All I'm asking you to do is slide 10 minutes into your day and work on this. Because if you work on this, a lot of those other things will start to take care of themselves.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to get connected, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. As always, keep growing out there.